Flagstaff Biking Organization's Facebook page. If you're on Facebook, please go to FBO's page and feel free to share the video. Help us build our audience. But we are live, which is great. Perfect. So, like I said, my name is Adam Shimoni. I am a board member with FBO, Flagstaff Biking Organization, and FBO every year puts on Bike Month. Did you all have fun during Bike Month? Thumbs up, couple thumbs down. I'm just kidding. Yeah, it was fun, right? Quick popcorn style. What were some highlights? What did people enjoy about Bike Month? Breakfast. Free breakfast. What else?
Bazaar.
The bazaar.
Back to restaurant discounts.
Yeah. Which ones?
I went to Diablo Burger.
Oh, nice. That's great. What else?
It was just nice to ride our bike to school instead of getting in the box. Have some fresh air.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is our last event likely as FBO for Bike Month, but we are also hoping to continue to encourage people to be biking all year long, all summer long. So we're going to keep working on that. But this is our closing event, and I was asked to partner with the library and coming here and having this discussion. And so thank you, Kenny, for having me and for having us and for putting this together for us. Can we give Kenny a round of applause? And of course, as soon as I had this opportunity, I was thinking, what should we talk about? What can we do? And I pulled in my friend Sam, who works at the Klein Library.
Correct.
In archives.
Special collections and archives.
And Sam's a rock star. She's teamed up with me numerous times. And Kim, why don't you come out here too? You're here for this discussion. Kim's part of the BAC, like I mentioned, as is Sam, the Bicycle Advisory Committee. And Kim also does work with the Flagstaff Biking Organization, not as a board member, but it seems like she is a board member. And Kelsey. Doing?
I'm the Safe Kids representative on FBO. That's my official title. I work at the county health department in injury prevention. So mostly with kids. So I do all the back to school, all those fun events, vaccine. So all that stuff. So yeah.
Kim crushed it this year. It was a lot of fun. Did anyone come to any of those pinnacle mass rides? Yeah, that was a great time. So Kim's going to be joining us for this discussion as well. And it's going to be very free-flowing. So we're going to go through the decades with you all here shortly and talk about the challenges and the opportunities of the past, present, and future. And Kenny, I just remembered to start us off, are we able to share a video?
Yeah.
Let's do that. And are you able to access YouTube? Yeah. Okay. And what kind of inspired this theme is the founder of FBO, Jeff Cross. He was in town recently, and I got to meet him and talk to him a little bit. And I did a quick video with him, of course, because that's what I do. And he spoke about the challenges throughout his work, both in the present, past, and future. And so I thought that would be a great way to kind of, start this conversation off with you all, is by having the founder of FBO in his own words. And he, I believe, is a city planner. He worked at the city of Flagstaff, I know that, and he's now, I think, in Vancouver or somewhere in Canada. And he has a very strong background in planning, and so he understands these things inside and out. So go to Denver Nuggets, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Flagstaff Biking Organization. And you'll see a video from Jeff Cross. So we're going to start the meeting, this conversation off with Jeff in his own words. Go down. Let's see if it's right there. Oh, that's funny. Maybe go to there he is, right there in the middle. So take a listen.
Let me just get this shared first. What's online?
Oh, interesting. I you turn it down on the computer, okay?
All right, let me just finish this.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Jeff Cross. I was the founder of Flagstaff Bike Organization 22 years ago. 2001, we started it with the idea of Bike to Work Week being the key kind of piece, as well as there were some trail issues at the time, potential closures to get up to Schultz Pass in Melbourne. And so a bunch of people came together and said, what can we do to actually create a voice and create some momentum? And as an urban planner, I've been involved in policy issues before, and we need good government, and we need motivated citizens, and we need people that are willing to use it once you put it there. And so Bike to Work Week became our catalyst for getting more and more people that were already riding, getting their friends, their family, their co-workers going, and using that to amplify the message with the city staff, with the county, that these urban trails that we were putting in, the bike paths, they were all worth it, because of each one of those as a battle involved. You're changing something, people are nervous about change, and you don't know what it's going to look like when it comes out. So I look around 22 years later after a beautiful, fun parade with Flagstaff biking still going. I'm super proud and I'm super excited that we are still moving forward on that. Now, I guess my reflection, being involved in these issues across Canada and the United States since then, is that you can never stop. You need to always keep seeking the next thing. There's always a new incremental piece of the network that needs to be built, and it doesn't get built by itself. You know, staff need encouragement, politicians need encouragement. In fact, when you look at Flagstaff now, there's such a beautiful network, but the remaining things are the difficult things. So it means that there's a trade-off. So you need people coming out, you need them to go to city council, you need them working with Flagstaff biking, have that credibility, have that amplitude of voice, and you need it at all ages, 8 to 88, feeling comfortable with what they're doing, whether it's riding to work or getting out on the mountain, working with the National Forest. I just encourage you to stay involved. And there's beautiful, wonderful people that have taken over the mantle and made this something great. So I encourage you to check out flagstaffbiking.org and sign up for something.
Awesome. Pretty awesome words that you have to
So
share.
I had the opportunity this morning.
I think it was too.
Love it. Anyone see that video? What do you think? Was that helpful? Anyways, that's fine. It's cool. It's cool. Anyways, I'd love to have you two maybe introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about why you're passionate about bikes, and then we'll dive into the presentation. Kim, would you like to start us off?
Well, let's see. I have been working with the county for over 15 years, and obviously started working with FBO. Been with them probably that long. I was originally hired as the Safe Routes to School coordinator. The county had a grant, and that's what I ran. So I was always in the schools, bike rodeos, bike education. And then Congress changed the funding, and we no longer had a grant. So thankfully, my supervisor absorbed me and still let me do as much biking as I could. And I became I'm a lead of American Bicyclist instructor. And so I teach adults and kids how to commute. I will confess, I'm a terrible mountain biker. Like terrible. I'm on my bike in town. I know that's crazy for some people, but I do enjoy riding. And but if it's in the mountains, I will be running because I'm just not good at it. And I'm sure I'm going to blow out a vehicle at some point. So I don't know. What else do you want me to say? Is that good?
One favorite memory from this past month.
Oh, my favorite memory is back to school day. Seacrest School had 126 7 kids ride. And the Peaks gave us breakfast. Breakfast burritos, no
Wow.
less. It wasn't just like yogurt and muffins. Anyway, it was amazing. And last year, they have parents and firefighters, so they blocked off the intersection at Fremont, which they did this year, which is probably good because I'm all for rules of the road. So, but when you have 127, it's, everyone panics that you have to stay together, But anyway, so I'm usually at the caboose all the trains, but that was really, really fun. So that was it.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah.
Sam?
Awesome. So hi, I'm Sam Meyer. As Evan mentioned, I do work at Klein Library. Just to be clear, I'm not here in an NAU capacity. I'm just here as a person. I grew up here in Flagstaff and then left before coming back to take this job. And I have not owned a car since I left Flagstaff at the age of 18. So I've been a pedestrian or a cyclist all of those years. I've ridden in lots of different cities with different infrastructure. And when I came here, getting involved in the cycling community and trying to advocate for making it better was something I was drawn to. Because I am an archivist, so I work with primary source material. My immediate thought was, what do I know how to do? I know how to do research. So that's what I've put together for Adam at various events and for you all, is some resources, mostly from Klein Library, but others are also held by Flagstaff Public Library or other institutions, just looking at the history of bicycling in Flagstaff and how we came to have what we see here today, to figure out how we can move forward from what has already been done.
Thank you, Sam. That's
Yeah.
perfect. And then one highlight from this past month.
Like I said, I grew up here in Flagstaff, and so I run into my dad on my ride to work all the time because he also rides his bike to work. So I was staffing the NAU Bike to Work Week breakfast, and my dad rolled up, and then I got to introduce him to all my colleagues, and like, this is my dad. He's on a bike too.
Check out his steel frame.
Yeah, exactly. He bikes every day, and he has actually biked to work every day, I think, for the past 20 years, even though he was involved in a pretty serious accident on Cherry Hill in 2008. Yeah.
How many people have been involved in an accident while being on their bike? Thank you, Sam. A couple quick questions, then I'm going to turn it over to Sam to kind of lead us through the presentation. Collision, thank you. Collision or crash, not accidents. Great point. These are not accidents. These are bad designs that result in crashes that leave us vulnerable as pedestrians and cyclists. I want to get a feel for who's in the room. I'd love to go around, but I'm not going to do that because it's going to take too long. But let's just raise our hands, and you can look around. If you're a mountain biker, raise your hand. Okay. If you're a road bike rider, and if you're just a commuter, not just a commuter, if you are a commuter, be proud, raise your hand. And if you are a kid riding your bike in your neighborhood, raise your hand. Yeah, all of our hands, right? Why do you love riding your bike? Just go ahead and shout it out, or raise your hand. I'll call it other way. Go ahead. Yes.
I like feeling the wind
Yeah.
out in the elements.
Right. Anybody else? Yeah.
I like seeing the prairie dogs on the
Yes. Cheering you on. Keep going.
It's cheaper than a car.
It's cheaper than a car. Anything else?
I like beating the traffic on Milton.
That's a good feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Until they yell at you as you're passing them. Anyways, I agree with that. And imagine if we had like a bike highway on Milton. Like, how many people would be like, you know what, I'm gonna ride my bike. That's just, I can't wait in traffic and just watch all these cyclists go by. Coming one day.
A comment online too. Someone said, Tyler said, I feel much more connected to the community traveling around by bike.
Thank you for voicing that. Thank you, Tyler, for tuning in. And then I was gonna ask, what kind of bike do you? Oh, what's your goals from this meeting today, this discussion? Do you have any goals that you'd like to make sure are addressed, or anything that you really want to make sure we cover? Any intentions that you have from this conversation today?
I was attracted by the pedestrians idea.
And what about pedestrians?
This past winter was a nightmare for pedestrians, and it kind of got me fired up. I think we need better crossings, people to take seriously cleaning off sidewalks, all that sort of thing. Sidewalks are not meant for piling snow on.
Right. And you know, the funny thing is, you know, we were tuning into the BAC meeting, the Bicycle Advisory Committee meeting at the city just now, and you heard staff and leadership saying why we should be removing these lanes due to the cost, due to maintenance. But how many vehicle mile lanes do you think the city maintains all year round? Throw out a number.
100.
100. And you have 200, 200, 200, 200. Yeah, 100 over here. 300, 350. Keep going. Who wants it? How much we got? 500. Any other bidders? 1,200 too high. 700. Over 700 vehicle lane miles we maintain. And I'd love to hear staff say, hey, we need to cut this down. We can't afford to maintain all these lanes. They're breaking, the cars are heavy, the maintenance is too expensive. But yet, the 1 mile stretch on Butler, ooh, looking at it, right?
There's that one and then there's one.
On the, yeah.
Correct.
Any other intentions that anyone would like to voice? And you can voice this throughout the meeting too. Yeah.
Peter online said he would like to learn how he can support making flag more active.
Awesome. We will definitely get to that once we get to the future stuff. Anything else before I turn it over? Yeah.
I'm a transportation designer and kind of want to get a feel for the community's needs and wants.
Oh, great.
Awesome.
Great to have you. Thanks for being here. Okay. Last call. Yes.
I'd say more thought about car sharing as like a city thing. Because
Okay.
sometimes you need cars.
Yes.
And if that was a viable option, people would take a car and bike.
Yes. Yeah, I looked into a program like that in LA a few years ago, and very exciting stuff for sure. I don't know if Flagstaff's big enough for such a program, but yeah, we're small enough that it makes sense too. You know, but I like where your mind's at, and that's one of our last bullet points on our last slide is talking about congestion and congestion relief, and that's one of the tools. That's great. Thank you. Anything else? Yes.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the condition of the road surface and the floods as well.
When was the flood spade? Who knows? I think this was the last time it was maintained, was one of those first put in. Who knows when the floods was maintained? Was it throughout the year, or built, I should say. Keep going.
Way back,
Yeah,
1992.
keep going.
75.
88. 88. And to my understanding, that was the last time they maintained it, or paved it. So,
Is that
what
just-
road in town can you draw that same compromise, or comparison to? Not many, right? I doubt there's many. But our key floods that we ride every day as a main thorough commuter east-west, separated from the road, is a mess, right? And it's dangerous. Anyways, I'm gonna turn it over to Sam because she has a lot of great things to share with us. And so hopefully we'll be out of here before 10 p.m. But thank you all. Thank you all for being here, and we're gonna and feel free to kind of jump in. I want this to be engaging.
Yeah, you should feel free to ask questions or interrupt me if you want. I'm totally cool with that. And also I can speed through stuff if you're like, I don't care about the 70s. Why are you talking about this? Okay, so I just wanted to start by saying that, today we think about roads as being primarily for cars. But if you think about roads through the course of human history, that's not what they're for. That's not why we developed roads or paths. We developed them for humans first, and then for horses, and then for bicycles. Around the turn of the century, as lots of you probably already know, there was a huge bicycling craze across the US and in Europe. And even here in Arizona, at that time, some of the people who brought you roads, including major roads like Route 66, were bicyclists because they wanted the roads to be improved so they could ride on them. So this is just a screenshot from an exhibit about the history of Route 66, detailing the connection between Route 66 and what's known as the Good Roads movement that happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s, in which some of the first adopters of automobiles, but predominantly bicyclists, advocated for smoother and better roads so that they could actually get around. So even a major road like Route 66 exists here in part because of bicyclists, right? So thinking that roads are for cars is really pretty contemporary as far as a way of thinking about transportation for humans. Additionally, if you look globally, more people ride a bicycle than use any other form of transportation except for walking. Sorry, I don't have a lot to say about pedestrians, but I can't say that. In a global context, right? We are a car-heavy society. That's not true everywhere else, right? So I think it's just important to have that framing to say, you know, roads aren't for cars. Roads are for people to get places in whatever mode they choose. Okay, but if you're looking specifically at bicycle infrastructure in Flagstaff, dedicated spaces on the roads after they did get taken over by cars, what you're looking at are things that happened in the 1970s. And one of the very first things that happened was that city council had to evaluate requests they were receiving from the community to get bike lanes put in. If you think about the 1970s, a couple things are happening right now. Some of you may have been around. If you want to say more than I can say because I wasn't there, I welcome that. But you have a nascent environmental movement happening in the late 1960s and early 1970s. There's an energy crisis. Oil is very expensive. People are really worried about energy independence for the United States, so there's a lot of interest in alternate modes of transportation. And bicycling becomes more popular. It's a combination of those factors, right? People looking to drive less and also to protect the environment. The hole in the ozone is a big concern at the time, things like that, right? So what happens is that within Flagstaff, you see groups of students from NAU organizing to ask for more bike lanes on campus. And you also see community members, many of whom were racing bicyclists, road cyclists, asking for the same within city limits. And they go to city council to say, hey, we don't have anything here. Can you look into this, please, and develop a plan for some bike lanes? So this is a Daily Sun article from 1972 talking about one of the first public hearings on bike lanes. I mentioned that NAU students played a big role in this. That's because in around the same time frame in the late 60s, South Campus was built. Have people been to South Campus? Yeah, okay. So South Campus was built originally. North and South Campus were conceptualized as totally different campuses. You would be an undergrad and live on South Campus, and then you would move to North Campus if you were a senior or higher in your ranking. If I'm wrong on that, I'm really sorry. It's either that way or the other way. But there were no great ways for NAU students to get between the two campuses, right? There had been a lot of construction of buildings, not so much for roads or other infrastructure. So NAU students start saying, hey, we need bike lanes, and they can go directly to the president, which was President Walker at the time, to request those, right? Because NAU can put them in without the city. But NAU students don't just want bike lanes on campus, they want bike lanes to get to campus, which is where they start cooperating with other people in the community to say, hey, this is one of the major ways that people are trying to go around town is getting to and from campus. And this is a photo showing South Campus under construction around that time frame. Similarly, like I said, luckily for Flagstaffians, at the same time, the state of Arizona is thinking, hey, we're actually also interested in bikeways. We want to see what cities have them already, what cities are feasible for putting in this kind of infrastructure, and how we as a state, with federal money funding that's been made available, could develop this alternate transportation infrastructure. So the state commissions this study, the Arizona Bikeway Study, which to my knowledge is the first one we ever did as a state in 1973, saying, okay, what's already there? What should we do? Where is there a need? And they identify certain roads within Flagstaff and in other cities as possible places that you could put in a bike lane, or a bike lane would be helpful. Some of these roads have different names now, so that's always a little tricky when you're looking at historical documentation. But you'll see a couple familiar things here, like Beaver Street, Mount Eldon, Cedar, Fourth. Some corridors that are still big major travel corridors. So City Council proposes its first bike path, which is coincidentally the bike path going on Beaver Street to campus, right? That, at this time, Beaver is a two-way street. And so the initial idea is to put a bike lane either direction or to have a bidirectional lane. This gets brought to city council for a public hearing. And then pretty immediately, city council gets sued over this idea by business owners on Beaver Street who don't want them to remove parking on the street. So the lawsuit tangles up this project for several years. Additional questions are raised about, does city council even have the right to put in bike lanes? This isn't something that they've specifically been given the right to do. City council says they do because they have the right to monitor traffic, but they're not successful in the law. Again, and I should probably move this slide, but people are still trying to ride regardless of the lack of infrastructure. So I just put in these couple slides to say, there's groups of folks who are organizing and riding anyway, and they're just riding the road, right? They're just riding wherever they can. And that's why they're continuing to push city council, because they're experiencing firsthand the lack of infrastructure and what it means for their racing. So in the mid-70s, the city of Flagstaff says, hey, you know what we should do is we should make a plan. And so they established a citizens bikeway committee, which I believe was an ad hoc committee, to develop a comprehensive plan for Flagstaff to say, if we were going to put in bike lanes, what would we do? And they asked NAU to participate. They asked lots of other folks to participate in this committee. At the same time, people are still saying, hey, we've got some little bike paths that have been put in now. You can sort of see it here, the proposals for where paths would be. But it's still very dangerous. So as they're working on this plan, citizens and folks on the committee are trying to identify where the danger areas are and what the issues are going to be. And what they wind up coming up with is the city's first bike plan. I've seen different dates for this. I believe it's from 1979. Sometimes it says 1980. It's super hard to see the bikeway system on this map, but there are paths on there. It's just really difficult to see. But this whole document is available on City Council's website. If you want to read through it, it's up there and you can access it all.
Sam, do you know if were those lanes separate lanes or were they just bike lanes on the road?
Painted lanes on the road. Yeah. Some of the costs get discussed in some of these articles too, and I believe when the Beaver lane, I'm not misremembering, was proposed, the cost would be like $7,000 to paint a line on Beaver to campus. So nothing, at this point, nothing is separated. And that's actually a really good point because the popular concept at this time was something called vehicular cycling, might be familiar to a lot of you, which is that bicycles should be treated as a vehicle, right? And they are entitled to the roadway and they should be on the roadway, which isn't necessarily a bad idea. A lot of people are still proponents of this model of bicycling, but it does mean that everything is on the road, in the road, part of the road, not really so much separated facilities.
Who feels comfortable on the road?
Downtown.
Downtown.
Right downtown.
Okay. Who does not feel comfortable on the road? Taking the lane. Okay. Yeah, they say we have a very high cycling culture in Flagstaff, and we'll get to a slide that shows that later. But they say that less than 1% of the population feels comfortable on the road. So we are the 1% that are comfortable on the road. If you build separated infrastructure, it opens the corridor up to 60% of the population. So you go from less than 1% to 60% of the population at large, right? We're not just talking about cyclists at large. So imagine what would happen to congestion if we build for the 60%. It doesn't take up that much space, right? We're not talking about 7 lanes. We're talking about 1 lane, right? Separated from cars, but it costs money.
So, shockingly, after this plan is released, the city is like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but we don't have any money. That's basically it's like, we like it for sure, the environment, reducing traffic, sounds great. We're not really gonna fund it. They ask for reasonable things, and that's kind of it. So some things do move forward during this time frame, but really there's not a lot of political will here, at least at the city council level. There's a lot of community engagement. not so much interest in paying for infrastructure. So just something that Adam and I were talking about is, in every decade and at all times, there are both opportunities and challenges. So for the 1970s, like I mentioned, some of the opportunities for folks in this time were that there was interest in developing alternative transportation networks because of the energy crisis and the oil issues. That led to funding for research and development for bicycle infrastructure. Even just getting a statewide plan or a city plan was a huge step forward in terms of having an idea of what this would look like. A lot of that is tied to environmental activism, both on campus and off campus. People are really concerned and are pouring that concern into actions like biking. Road racing community, again, really pushed forward here, was a strong advocate throughout this decade, as well as NAU students. Interagency cooperation, and then we created the first bike plan. That's huge. Seems not big, but it's very big. Unfortunately, all of this is happening within sort of an unclear policy landscape in terms of what authority city council had, which does get clarified, throughout the decade and in following decades. But at the time, it's hard to get something off the ground. You can't prove you have the right to do it. Funding, that's going to come up every single decade. Lack of political will, the legal challenges, like I mentioned, that lawsuit where, if you could say this will cause commercial damage, then you could get it shut down. Again, I feel like we see this every decade. And then I think a more nuanced question is this question of, is bicycling for transportation or is it for recreation, right? And how do we build infrastructure it's for one of those two purposes? At the time, right, in the 1970s, just another note to say that I should have put on here, a lot more kids are riding to school. And so there is a lot, and walking to school, as Kim can speak to, than there are now, right? So there's a real emphasis during this decade on providing infrastructure specifically for children to get to school, which kind of dissipates as the decades go on. Then it becomes, how do we get kids to do this again versus kids are already doing it in the 1970s.
To jump on that point, I wanted to share, and I believe it is in the 70s, we always look to Amsterdam, the Netherlands, Denmark, right? A lot of those movements, they had cities just like us. They had infrastructure just like we do, with cars being the main mode, right? But I think what's changed, especially back in the 70s, what happened was a lot of kids were getting killed. They were getting run over by cars, right, as they were going to school. And so there was a huge movement that took off that was parents and kids taking it to the streets, protesting, saying, we need better infrastructure because our kids are dying. And I think that's the real catalyst that really shifted their approach and was that pivot point. Well, before, are you moving on to the next decade? Just really quick, does anyone have anything else to add in terms of stories or comments about the 70s?
Yeah, to comment online.
Yeah.
So Tyler said a big issue is that vehicle infrastructure has dedicated funding sources while pedestrian/cyclist infrastructure is typically approved on project-by-project basis. And he said it creates a false impression that pedestrian/cyclist infrastructure is more expensive than vehicle infrastructure.
That's a good point. Any other comments? Who was here in the 70s? Yeah. Does this resonate? Do you remember any of this if you were in Flag?
I wasn't in Flag, but no, I rode my bike home from the upper grades, like 7th and 8th grade softball practice, 5 or 6 miles out to the country. And this is back in the Midwest. And I remember my brother had this generator on his bicycle. It was a headlight basically, and the generator on the back wheel. So you had to keep that light. Those were cool actually.
Still are.
Yeah, and I don't know. It was a different time. I think. I don't know. Everybody just goes so fast now in their cars. They just go slow. And so they're going up. But when you were talking about the bicyclists as, they have to follow the rules of, a car when they're on the road, as I understand. And I always want that bike in front of me so I can see, and but it just, and sorry, I want to get back on my bike, but about 13 years ago, I decided to only ride my bike during the summertime. I haven't ridden the bike in like 5 years now, because I got my bike fixed and it's like rode it one time and it hasn't been fixed, so I need some help getting back on my bike. And the title of Biking for All, I wanted to, as an older person with some challenges, I wanted to know like what that for all means. You know, so because hopefully that means that 30% of people in town who have, you know, mobility or other issues.
So 60% is the number we're looking at in terms of potential riders when we talk about for all. And as you heard in the opening video from Jeff Cross, 8 to 80. Did anyone catch that when he said that? 8 to 80. That's a design policy phrase that other towns use too. I've heard Portland, I've heard Boulder, I've heard Eugene talk about 8 to 80. And it's a design approach that builds for the 8-year-old to the 80-year-old. And so it's kind of like that 60%, you know, because you said you want the bike in front of you as a vehicle, I believe, so you can see them. But how many cyclists feel comfortable in front of a vehicle, especially with today's trucks? Do you think an 8-year-old feels comfortable out there? What about an 80-year-old, you know? Or even someone maybe that's just a little bit slower on the bike, right? Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I apologize for adding that on.
Oh, you're good.
That's okay.
It seems to me like, I just hearing that there wasn't interest in infrastructure for pedestrians and funding for pedestrians and cycling, just to jump off of what you were saying about mobility issues and everything, this being pre-ADA, it feels a sort of like, that just seems baffling that there is no interest in pedestrians or, I mean, so I would hope that once we get to the 90s, that flops a little bit, because, you know, bicycle infrastructure and pedestrian infrastructure is great for accessibility. You know, no, okay.
That is.
The conversations you're talking about seems to be completely ignoring that, and like the aid to people with mobility issues when you put in pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. You know, I just don't see that anywhere here. When I really expect to necessarily, even though that doesn't happen in the way for that. So
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, you finished.
Oh, okay, yeah, so for children, yeah, there was definitely an emphasis on that. I will say too, and I don't know a ton about this, so I'm not gonna pretend that I do, but another thing to keep in mind is like what bicycles were available and what you could do on them at the time frame, right? Because a lot of the things that you can ride, the bikes you can ride now, especially if you think about like adaptive bikes, didn't exist at the time frame. Mountain bikes, as we know them today, not a thing yet, you know? So when you're looking at bicycles, you're looking at very specific vehicles, which still I think were more accessible to a broader range of people than you think. But it's not the range that we have now in terms of safety, comfort, security, things like that. So that's, I think, part of it. But I also, personally, I think part of it too is that a lot of the advocacy in this time period is coming from people who are extremely comfortable on bicycles, right? And or again, to protect children who are riding to school. So that is limiting in terms of who you're looking at as riders.
I was just gonna say in the 70s, and yes, there was a lot in the 70s. It was a different time. It was more laid back. It was, you know, your parents, you know, in the summer, you left in the morning after breakfast and you didn't come home till dinner, and it was independence. Bike was independence, right?
Oh, yeah.
You went to get ice cream down the store, you went to your friend's house. And so it was a slower time, a different time. People weren't in a hurry like they are now. Everything. We weren't scheduled as much. We weren't in a hurry. It was more family time. It was more relaxed. It was, you know, and then your parents take you out of the house and told you not to come back until dinner. No, but it was just a different time too. But I mean, that's what I remember. Is my bike, independence. I could go all sorts of places, you know, way faster than on my feet.
Do people share that perspective, that viewpoint, that their bike is their independence? Yeah.
I'll say one other thing. With sprawl, get places much easier want to hear it, because whoever just works everything together here. And so, more and more people deciding that,
Yeah, and for Flagstaff too, like Flagstaff was a much smaller town at that time. So, you know, I think that's what you're saying. Like, I had a map in here and I took it out just to show city limits in the 70s. And it's not what you would think of today as city limits. So, all right, so rolling into the 80s. Oh,
Wow. Are they all gone? Oh, wow.
that wasn't on my notes. I didn't memorize this.
Oh, there it is.
Yay. Okay, thank you.
Yay.
Okay, so after city council is like, whatever, there's a lot more pressure applied, especially from NAU to say like, no, we really do care about these issues. And it does get elevated to council in one of the elections. I don't know, longtime Flagstaffians might recognize some of these names, like Paul Babbitt's up there. Other folks who are running for council are at least talking about this question of, you know, what should we do in terms of bicycle infrastructure, local forms of infrastructure. But again, there's still a ton of implementations. Things start to be built in kind of a piecemeal way. You know, I quoted this in an email that I sent recently about bicycle infrastructure. So there was a bike path that was put in on what's present day Route 66, which presents Santa Fe Avenue. And from what I've read in letters to the editor, people really did not enjoy that bike and found it to be super dangerous because it was only about a mile long. So you were like on a path for a mile, and then you were back in the road on Route 66. A lot of the complaints in this time period are basically about that piecemeal implementation, that things are just being put in a little bit here and there, and it makes it hard to get around and make a comprehensive network.
Thankfully, that's over, right?
Yeah, not a problem at all today. This is a map of a statewide map that was issued by the Department of Transportation in 1985, showing some of the major biking routes across the state. This is Flagstaff. You can kind of see that the major route that's identified is basically along present day Route 66. And then I believe that is Butler. So it's still a pretty comparable traffic pattern. And this, I tried to see if they were saying you should bike here. It doesn't look like it. It just is like, you could bike here. This could be a way that you could get around. It's an option. But one of the big things that does happen during this time period is the city starts thinking really seriously about open space and green belts and preserving some of the natural environment around Flagstaff, especially the forest. And as part of that, thinking about growth of the city, right? This is a time of, the 70s and the 80s are a time of expansion for Flagstaff. Getting to the 90s, there's more growth that happens. And citizens start to get concerned about the forest, right? People live here because they enjoy being close to the forest and close to nature, close to the mountains. And it seems like the rate of expansion is threatening that, right? If I'm remembering right, I wish not like this year. The Walmart goes in, the one that's out over on the side of town by like Big 5. Yeah, right. So there's a lot of like, things are getting changed in the city, it's moving out. And there's been some raising of green spaces or raising the health in that Walmart. And so the city starts other planning that winds up tying to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure because they start thinking about ways to preserve that green space as they're looking at the growth of the footprint of the city. So this is a letter to Dale Shewalter. Does anyone know Dale by name? Does anyone know the Arizona Trail? Yeah. So Dale was the like godfather of the Arizona Trail. It was his idea. He was a science teacher here in town. This is a letter from one of the city planners asking Dale to help with another bike planning project. And this eventually becomes the FUTS, right? This is sort of the start of planning for the FUTS is around this time period in the 80s. But as I mentioned, other documents that are being issued by City Council at this time are addressing bikeways and pedestrian paths, right? So again, I'm sorry I didn't include some of the pedestrian stuff, but this is available at Time Library if you ever want to come check it out. It talks about the pedestrian infrastructure plans. And saying we should be thinking about this as an effective mode of transportation. It would be so great if you connected green space, you could get people on trails, all these things that we want to do. These are some of the first proposed trail segments, and I apologize, I know they're hard to see, for the urban trail system that get proposed by Dale Showalter and others who work on this in 87, 88. They're real hard to see and not bad at maps, but if anyone can identify these things, please feel free. Anyone better at maps than
One was like,
they probably are. So in the corner, it identifies the sections, they're numbered there as Thorpe Road to the Flagstaff Historic Site, which is, where would that be?
That'd be the Pioneer Museum.
Oh, yeah.
one is, I think, the care.
Yeah.
So it looks like-
Right, they have it.
Yeah.
And then two school, we put that way.
Yeah. Going down a wash to South Elm Street. That's why I
Like Wallapai and Zuni are, or where Jay Powell is.
over there.
Yeah, it is over by CCC, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where there's
yeah,
actually
you're right. Mhm.
So these are a lot of the early segments, and they still exist, to what Adam was saying before, right? So there's a development of these trail systems for proposals for trails. At the same time, oh yeah, so at the same time in Flagstaff, so I forgot why I put this here. There's a huge growth in mountain biking in Flagstaff in the 80s, which I can maybe talk to better than I can. But if folks are familiar with Cosmic Ray Rudy, who owned Cosmic Cycles for a long time and passed away a few years ago, he starts issuing his guides, his mountain biking guides to trails outside Flagstaff around this time frame. I can't remember exactly when he publishes the first one, but he and other folks here, many of them associated with Cosmic Cycles, start really promoting Flagstaff as a mountain biking destination, along with Sedona.
How did they come up with their mountain bikes? They couldn't just order one. How did the early entrepreneurs come up with it? Any ideas? They took a road bike and it's a trend now that people are doing. It's called cyclocross bikes. Right? What's a cyclocross bike? Who knows? No,
Okay.
close. Close but not quite. Does anyone know this? No one knows what cyclocross? So it's basically a road bike with the drop handlebars, but with fat tires, right? And the bike is made to take off-road, go on the urban trail. It's not like a delicate road bike. It's like a ruggedy road bike. So that's basically what the early pioneers of mountain biking were doing. They're taking road bikes, they were putting bigger tires on. It's my understanding. I wasn't there.
They're kind of just modern hybrid.
Yeah.
And so this article, which is from the Lumberjack, the NA2 paper, is about this group of mountain bikers that are based out of Flagstaff called the Arizona Rough Riders. They might actually not be based out of Flagstaff, I believe that they were. And they mentioned here too that the first off-road bicycle adventure in Flagstaff was conducted in 1894 when 60 members of the Coconino Cycling Club rode from Flagstaff to the Grand Canyon. So people have been obviously riding not on big trails for a long time, but there's a huge growth in the popularity of mountain biking around this time frame that winds up shaping the books pretty significantly. And again, this is like a national thing, right? Mountain biking becomes a thing in the 80s. Not a mountain biker, so that's all I can tell you.
I think there's some story on whether Flagstaff created a mountain bike or something in Canada. But it was around, it was like within the same 5 years, and this was like a few years ago.
And I know that FBL has copies of documentary about Elson Miles and Ray Ruby and some of the other Flagstaff folks who were really instrumental in mountain bicycling here. I saw that he put it in the bicycling display before, so you can check that out when you're done if you're related to that part. To speak to some of the opportunities and challenges in this time really briefly, right? Major opportunity here is that because Flagstaff is developing these other urban urban planning frameworks, especially around growth management, open spaces, and green belts, there's an opportunity to hitch transportation objectives to those other larger plans, or to address those needs for pedestrians and bicyclists within this broader context. The foots obviously gets developed, and that's really huge to promote the cycling in the community, or begins to be developed for mountain biking, like I just said. But there isn't a new bicycle plan created during this time frame. It's still the 1979 plan. And in my mind, prioritizing trail development, while I love trails and they're great, definitely shifts this phase of development from bicycling as transportation more towards bicycling as recreation, right? Which I have no problem with. I do bicycling as recreation all the time, but it is different in terms of the infrastructure you develop.
So really quick, from a city planning perspective, what happened, right? We had a plan built, done in the 70s. It didn't get implemented, right? But yet we're probably still building roads, we're still building infrastructure, buildings, growing, etc. What do you think happened? This is a big plan that's approved tonight.
Yeah.
What the local level?
The
Why would the city come up with a plan and go through that whole process with the public and the council, just to create a plan and not actually address it?
Happens all the time.
Yes, it does. That is the sad truth, is that happens all the time. What were you gonna add to?
Well, moneyed interests had a louder speaking voice
Yeah.
at the time.
Right.
It's more of a question, when was I-40 started construction and finished through Flagstaff?
So, I don't know exactly when.
But I think actually Reagan is a good point, because there is a cut in federal funding at this time, right? Like part of this, well, some of these things that there was an increase in federal funding for this kind of development and transportation, and then that goes away. Municipalities have a hard time, again, because the priorities are for vehicle traffic and roads, coming up with that money on their own. So that's totally legit. Great. During the 1990s, basically we finally do another plan. This is a letter from the planner coordinator of the City of Flagstaff Ad Hoc Bikeways Committee. I should say another issue that I didn't put as a challenge on the previous slide is that there's no formal unit within city government at this time to advocate for the needs of pedestrians or cyclists that I'm aware of, definitely not for cyclists. And instead there are these ad hoc project-based committees who come up with a plan, and then the committee ceases to exist, right? So there's no consistency in terms of feedback, planning, or having a voice at that level. But this, in this time frame in around the early 90s, the city does convene an ad hoc bicycle committee, and they're basically like, hey, we have this plan from 1979, maybe we should update that. So this is a letter speaking to the interest in doing that. Amusingly, because I feel like we still point to Oregon, this letter also points to Oregon as a model for what Arizona could do in terms of transportation planning, that we should figure out at the state level, having someone who coordinates bicycle infrastructure across the state. We should have a statewide bicycle plan. This letter also mentions that Colorado has a statewide bicycle plan, so we're still comparing ourselves to some of the same people to say like, hey, we should do what they are doing and develop this for our state and our municipality. One thing I'll note here on the Reagan point and the funding point is that the letter does mention, basically, it doesn't look like we're gonna get federal funding for this, so we should develop a plan, but, you know, as always, implementing it is gonna be trickier. This is the plan. I believe that this is up on FBO's website, right?
I think so.
In full, if you want to read it, that's released in 1991. And I have another image, but I think I deleted it, so sorry about that. At the same time, the urban trail is really expanding. Again, the planning started in the 80s, but a lot of the trails actually start to open around this time frame or start to be bigger in terms of construction, maintenance, all those kinds of things are happening through the early 1990s. And then I wanted to mention this, even though it's a sad story, because it's a story from the Lumberjack Act from 1996. Because this is one of the first incidents I've seen, although I'm sure it wasn't actually the first, of a death that was caused when a vehicle collided with a cyclist. There's an NAU student who died. It was the first sort of bicycle ride that was sanctioned by the city. Was a commemorative ride in honor of this student who passed. And it appears, ignite a conversation around cyclist safety for at least a little bit in this time period. Another thing that happens in the mid-1990s, if folks were here, is that the city goes through another sort of big communal planning project called Flagstaff 2020. This was like a cooperative effort with the city, NAU, CCC, all these other, the county, all these different agencies to think about what the future of Flagstaff would look like. Again, in part because of massive growth that people were anticipating was going to happen here in the 90s. And they, again, call attention to the need for a robust transportation system that includes pedestrian infrastructure, bicycle infrastructure, decreases vehicle traffic, all those kinds of things. There's a lot of repetition in these plans. If you look at the 1991 plan, part of it is basically like, hey, remember we did a plan in 1979 and it was a good plan? Whatever happened to that plan? But this, to speak to the children thing, Ken, I think you'll appreciate this. As part of Flagstaff 2020, coordinators went to a bunch of schools and asked children to talk about what they wanted for the city in the year 2020, which seems unimaginably far off in 1996. And this student drew some bike lanes. I don't know if you can tell that that's what they are, but they are. So this was another, again, kind of enforcement of like, there's desire here, but there's not necessarily funding. The opportunities and challenges look similar here in that there was another oil crisis in the 90s. So there's again a new wave of interest in alternative transportation, although I'm not certain how much funding resulted. New bikeways plan, continued development, interagency cooperation, similar things to what we saw before. But again, not necessarily funding, dangerous riding conditions for cyclists in Flagstaff, and no sort of permanent voice for cyclists at the city level at this point in time. And I don't know anything about the 2000s, so this is big down. I only know about old stuff.
Can we give Sam a round of applause? That's a lot of information, and that's a tough act to follow because Sam really knows her stuff, and I'm so grateful that she's able to present that to us all. Any comments or questions thus far? Now that we're getting into the good stuff.
Early to mid-90s is when the downtown revitalization
Yeah.
happened.
Good point.
And the Uber and San Fran went back to one way, and the parking, whatever the call, it's all the beautification, those outcrops, and that's all put in during that project. Yeah.
Wow.
And then it was early 90s because, Forest just to exist. It was just 2 lanes on Cedar, you can still see it. The path up there to Buffalo Park, that was still there in 89. The forest was only made in like the early 90s. So, but yeah, bike paths, I remember San Francisco being 2 lane, and my kids were like 4 and 5 years old on their bicycles.
Wow.
We're riding. I always wanted them in front of me too. It was a little crazy, but we made it. That's good. That would probably not be. How people do that now, right? I don't know. They're pretty young, but I probably now I would have them on my ride, behind me or something. So sorry.
Well, thanks for sharing. That's great. That's great. So, disclaimer: I have not done the research needed to properly present on what I'm about to present on. I'm going to do my best and hope that others in the room might be able to help fill in, especially maybe Kim at times. We'll see though. But obviously, my expertise is more about the recent past and the future. So we'll get to that in a minute. But the 2000s are going to be a little bit tricky to get through just because I don't have all the information to share with you about what really took place. But Bike to Work did take place, and that was, I want to say, 22 years ago. Because I know it's our 20th anniversary, but maybe it was 21 years ago then? Because I know we skipped a year.
We did, I thought the
The
death.
video, he spoke to it.
Yeah, so I think we're coming on 23.
23 years, okay, so I
I
was
think it's
right.
right around there, yeah.
So, yeah, I was gonna say, okay, there's a day in here, 2002. So the first Bike to Work week occurred, and that was done by Jeff Cross and FBO. And that was a week long, right, not a month long, and that was a big deal. Was anyone part of that ride? Or that week, okay. So that took place, and then I just put a screenshot in here. The FlagstaffBikingOrg.org website has a documents page that if you click on it, has all the policy documents, advocacy documents, FBO has issued over the years in all these categories. And there's more that are cut off. You see Grand Canyon's at the bottom, but there's even more below that. Kim, can you speak to any of the advocacy back then? What I do know from talking to Jeff and Anthony is at the beginning, it was very much about trails and about mountain biking and advocacy around mountain biking. And I believe that Anthony joined Jeff at the time to kind of team up, and then they evolved and expanded into more urban and other needs for cyclists.
Safe routes came into play around, I want to say 2005-ish, where Congress actually put aside money for each state. And ADOT was the one who, it ran through ADOT. And so you could apply to ADOT, and then they had a sum of money that they were given. And then, so I know that we got our first, I don't know, it was county. We had the only grant in 07. And that's when I was hired to run that grant. That was our first Safe Routes grant. So I know that they had been coming. It wasn't super long time, but there was money set aside specifically for kids riding to school, walking to school, and that kind of thing. So it was free. And then they took it away.
And ADOT, if you don't know what ADOT is,
Oh, I'm
Arizona
sorry.
Department of Transportation. Us who work in the government, public
Sorry.
sector, always use acronyms. But yeah, Arizona Department of Transportation. They do all the highways. They oversee 180 in town, also Route 66, along with Milton.
I do know that in the early 2000s, there was a concern that they weren't seeing the number of kids riding to school anymore. Like that started to come into play. So.
And then we had our statewide bicycle and pedestrian plan. And Sam, you want to speak to this? Oh, this is the ADOT plan.
It's an ADOT plan, yeah, I think it's 2004.
Yeah.
I will be honest, I didn't get a chance to read a lot of it, which is why I don't know anything about the 2000s, but I think it speaks to what you're saying, Kim, around like there was federal and then state level interest in this stuff again.
And then we kind of just left this, I left this open just because I was going to ask you all if you knew of the opportunities and challenges. But I'm guessing they're more or less consistent. And because of time, I'm just going to keep going.
Somebody online asked why no, if you need both everything, is that why no bike or pedestrian counts?
Oh, I don't know.
Why what?
Why no pedestrian and bike counts? It's like by the city, I would guess.
I'm guessing, yeah.
I don't know if the city was taking counts at all. Have you seen anything about that?
Nope.
Yeah, I know that like recently, in like the past few years, I've been asking for counts, and they've been like having to go out and do the work, but it's only upon request and demand, quite frankly, that they need to start taking those accounts into accounts in how we plan and design our infrastructure. Because we always talk about modeling for cars and accounts for cars, but we rarely talk about pedestrian and cyclist accounts. So I just don't think much of an emphasis was placed there. And as you know, you see the common theme here, not much emphasis placed here at all. Right? We'll create a plan, the public gets that, you do that, and then things fall short. So in this says 2021, but 2018, I believe it is, the council adopted the new carbon neutrality plan unanimously. Remember that meeting? Was anyone there? It was a packed house. There were thousands of people engaging through the process. But it was a great event, and the council unanimously adopted it. It wasn't necessarily, the most progressive council we've ever had. And so it's a big deal, and it's because of the public engagement. And the climate neutrality plan, dives into emissions and what they call the big shift. So if you look at this pie chart, 30% of the emissions in Flagstaff are from transportation. This might be national data now that I think of it. Oh no, there it is, Flagstaff, 2019 emissions. 30%. So that's a third of the emissions to reach neutrality. 1/3 right there in transportation. Can anyone think of a way that we could minimize that category, that pie chart of transportation? Everyone all together. Bicycles. Right? Better bike and pedestrian infrastructure.
I will say, I'm gonna back you up
Yeah.
a second. So I believe in 2010, I think I should know because I was part of it. But the City of Flagstaff adopted a bicycle helmet ordinance for children.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there's a statute that says all kids in Flagstaff must wear a helmet in the city limits while biking.
See, that's great.
And it's a moving violation. So if you're not wearing one, you get a ticket.
Yeah. Same with lights, right?
Same with what?
Then you have to have a light on your bike.
Yes, that's like a state. This is just the city of Flagstaff. Because not all cities have a bike helmet ordinance.
Okay.
So, but it was a unanimous decision then too.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And it's funny, throughout the history, I have mixed feelings because it's like so frustrating when you see the priority place and where you see it drop off. I think I skipped a couple slides somehow. So this is the active transportation master plan that got going, I think in 2014 is when Martin and the city started working on it. Has anyone heard of the ATMP, the Active Transportation Master Plan? It's a great document. It has great information about right sizing, lanes, what bikes need, what pedestrians need. And here on the left side of the screen, you have, I love these charts, I actually hate them, but these are the crash data. And I think this is so telling as to where walkers and bikers are getting hit. And this is only crashes that occur at $1,000 of value above. So this is when the car gets damaged, quite frankly, right? And so a lot of crashes are not being tracked, again, to the data point. So this is the data of the more intense, severe crashes that are occurring. Bottom one is bicycle, top is pedestrian. Does anyone see a theme as to the area? It's kind of north campus and it's downtown, right? And it's also west of campus. What is it around campus that is getting in the mix here? Does anyone sing it out loud?
Milton.
Huh?
Milton Road.
I heard Milton, but it's students. It's students moving without a car, right? And students primarily are not the ones driving in town, right? And our crash data also backs that up and says that the primary population that's getting hit are 18 to 20, I think 22-year-olds, and primarily men on bikes for bicycles. And so Butler and Beaver, I believe, are right here, and Sanford and Beaver are right there. And then just north, what's that? I heard earlier, 66. So 66 is an ADOT road, not within city jurisdiction. Butler is within the city jurisdiction. So we're addressing that, right, at the city. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But that's something within our control. And so that's something that we're working on. But this crash data, as a former council member, gives me a real roadmap as to what we need to be addressing. Not as I'm not even an engineer or a planner, but I can imagine engineers and planners and leadership, with knowing this data, think, okay, let's address it. Or has it been addressed? Everyone? No. Why not? Lack of political will, lack of leadership, lack of interest, lack of care. I like to think that people do care, but at the same time, actions speak louder than words. And I don't see it.
Their data on who the drivers are, if they're Flagstaff.
I don't think we have that level of data. But what I do know is that the crashes are basically, I believe, a 50-50 split or somewhere near 50-50 split in terms of who's at fault. So humans are dumb, whether they're in a car, on foot, on a bicycle, on a moped, on a scooter, we're humans.
So to point that, I think probably the reason why we don't have that data is because it's trauma data. And so there's a bike in the car, the bicycle is going to be the trauma, not the person in the vehicle. So I think that's probably why we don't have, much data on that. I mean, it's probably police data, but it's not like, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this comes from trauma stats from the hospital.
Speaking of trauma, again, with that 50-50 mix of at fault, regardless of who's at fault, who's gonna get hurt? The person in the vehicle or the person on my foot or my car?
Well, obviously.
Oh, did you want to add something?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I think part of the problem is also education and lack of knowledge. And you speak to NAU. Okay, I'm not going to try to take the question, but on NAU campus,
Stand up. Get on camera.
No.
Go ahead.
So on campus, they want you riding on their pathways. They don't want you riding on the roadway. The only roadway that's a Shero is the one next to the library.
Yeah.
That's the only.
Or
No.
Knowles.
Knowles.
And
Sorry.
what's the share?
A Shero is a shared lane marking road that it's not wide enough to have a bike lane, so you share the lane. So the biker takes the lane as a vehicle, not in their own. Okay, sorry. So anyway, and then the second you're off campus, you're not supposed to be on the sidewalk. You're supposed to be on the road. You know what I mean? So there's a lack of knowledge, and I think a lot of people, young people, were taught the wrong way. They're like, ride against traffic so I can see where they're coming. Right? And people have told me that that's how they were taught how to ride, and that's not the way they're supposed to be. You know what I mean? So I think there's
Crash mode is counterflow on the sidewalk.
right. So I think lack of knowledge and education is probably another big issue.
I agree. I would add to that. Do we think 40-mile-an-hour travel is a thing that promotes safety? As educated cyclists, do you think we're safe when cars are going 40, 50? And maybe a little distracted? Just a little bit? So I love education. I'm all for it. I love that Kim and the BAC will advocate for that because the city could do more. And they, quite frankly, kind of dropped the ball on that at times, especially around the pilot lanes and those green boxes that were mentioned and whatnot.
Any of those things, crosswalks that
Anything.
people don't, drivers
Yeah.
and people using them don't know. Like it's
Zero
all
education.
education.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think it's important to note here, looking at like city code and also Arizona revised statutes, that every intersection that isn't so every intersection, pedestrians do have right of way in the state of Arizona. And according to the city, bicycles are allowed on sidewalks unless they're class 3 e-bikes.
They're not allowed on the sidewalk in downtown.
But other than downtown, yeah, that's
But they're allowed, other places, absolutely, class 3 have to be on the roadway, but they're not allowed.
class 3 road, sorry, e-bikes are
Sorry.
faster. They're like throttle. Did you have anything else to add? It's great.
So that's a good rule into, I think 70% of the crashes within the data we have is in intersection, or there's a large percentage within intersections. That's the majority of it, and then 70% of those are at unsignalized intersections. So what they call an intersection is every single driveway, every single collision or conflict. And so I'm really interested in honing in on that 70, like of the majority of the majority is at unsignalized intersections. And so getting us to be safe at every single driveway is really interesting, which kind of, it makes sense once the crash data is like going counterflow on the sidewalk, because drivers, they don't stop at the sidewalk and then they just pull right through, so that's the pull out. But like they're not looking in the opposite direction. We're going like 10 to 20 miles per hour, like that, and pedestrians are going 2 miles per hour. That's where I'm very intrigued.
The best towns from my research that speak to how to really create road shift to allow for alternatives. say that you need separated infrastructure. It's not one that crosses a bunch of road driveways and on-ramps and off-ramps into businesses, yeah.
And I think that's where, just to give, I think Martin tried so hard, he knows all the things. But they did a really good job on that Route 66 bus news segment that goes behind those businesses towards 4th Street. So we don't have to cross, I mean, it's a sidewalk bus, but we don't have to cross all those driveways where cars are going into the businesses. Is that fantastic?
So
That was really well done.
separated holistic systems is one key factor. And the second one is maintenance, proper quality maintenance year round. So you do those two things, people will ride. And you know, we can educate people as much as we want, but if we had that system in place, you know, a lot of times, so let's see, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself, but we got some good things coming. So we talked about this. Yes.
Actually, I have a question about the 2023 or the A and T.
And really quick, I'm so sorry. It is 7 o'clock. If people do need to leave, thank you for coming. I'm going to try to wrap this up shortly here, but we got some really good things in the next few minutes. Yeah.
So the active transportation plan references a 2003 bike design guide from the Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Yep.
That no longer is on their website, and I cannot find it anywhere. Is that still the code that the city's referencing for bike design?
Oh, no, that's a really interesting question, but
I found a hard copy and it's beautiful. Like I want to reference it, but I don't know if it's the city standard still.
I don't know, but I know that Metro Plan was that they took the city, they took the FBO and I think they kind of reworked things and made Metro Plan. So you might look, they might have some data. They don't?
It's
Have you
missing-
looked?
Yeah, like on their rebranded website.
Oh, I
and
don't
everything.
know.
It's just gone from the
email me
internet.
and we'll find it. That's an interesting question, but it all comes down to our code. It's something that I learned 3 years into council. And I remember the day I learned that in an executive session, which is now open to the public, I found out that it comes down to the damn code. And I was like, why didn't you tell me this earlier? As you see me spinning my own wheels trying to figure out how to make change in the city through policy, and you tell me 3 years in it's the code. And so they're working on a code change now, but that's going to take a couple more years. Here is a map of the city of Flagstaff, and I just wanted to point out, this is kind of the way I think. I thought to myself, okay, I sit down Martin's, who was referenced, and we go, he's the city's multimodal planner. And I said to him, okay, show me this GIS map, highlight the protected bike lanes that we have. And he did, he filtered it. And I said, okay, now highlight for me the gaps in a different color. And that basically identified 9 miles of missing lanes around town. So 2 miles that you see with the pilot on Beaver and Butler, were the initial two miles that we were going to start, with the intention of learning from them and then implementing the solution to the rest of the 7, to create a holistic route that goes basically along Butler, up 4th Street, across Lockett and Cedar, over to Forest, and then down Beaver and Sanford. But you can't go down both, but basically that would be the loop of protection for cyclists to the best of our ability, although there are tons of on and off ramps, driveways, right? All these conflict points, as engineers would call them. But that was the intention I had with those 2 miles. And of course, we researched the best design, the best approach. But this is within that map, the ATMP, and I just wanted to highlight that because that's just the way I think. And this is within the regional plan. I feel like there's slides that are not. Oh, here we go. I don't know if we somehow skipped this or what, but this is section 10 of our regional plan. Do people know what the regional plan is? It's another guiding document of the city, and although it's not the code, which is at the root of all of this, this is supposed to influence the code. But I would say that there's some very major gaps between the code and what the regional plan, which is voter approved by all of us, states. So transportation section 10, if you read it, it's on the city website. Oh my gosh, it's like built for bikes, built for pedestrians, create, allow kids to ride to school. All these great things that we believe in and are talking about, but yet you don't see the action in the code. You don't see it reflected. And so I would call this out often as a council member. This is a chart within the regional plan, and it speaks to levels of service. Has anyone heard of levels of service? LOS? This is what is like the God when it comes to road design. is levels of service. To engineers and whatnot and planners, it's all about the level of service. It's gotta be an A, B, or C for cars. At an intersection, at a new roadway, it's gotta prioritize the level of service for cars. And that's above all, LOS, and it drives me nuts. And what's the difference between level of service A to B to C? Who knows? How much longer of a wait does a car need to wait between A, B, and C? Is it a minute? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 10 seconds? What do you think? Yeah, we're talking seconds here. 10, 20, 30 seconds at a time. That can create a D. And I hate this personally because levels of service A through F, I believe, is misleading. It's confusing. Whoever wants to approve an F. F is intuitively taught to us to be a bad thing. But for downtown businesses, F is the spot, right? You want an F if you're a downtown business, or if you're in a business corridor. You want to slow people down if you want to prioritize bike lane. So, well, this is huge, and this is something that the city is starting to get away from, but yet it's so embedded in the culture of engineers that it is hard for them to see past LOS for cars. And it is so difficult to get them, engineers, to see past this. So I went through this with our staff at one point, and we talked about this urban category of LOS. So this is LOS for urban people, so walkers. And they said, okay, or in urban areas, sorry. And then they said, okay, so transit, bicycle, and pedestrian, this H means high priority. So I said, okay, where do we have high priority pedestrian in town? And I was told downtown. Do you feel like downtown is the most pedestrian-friendly area you've ever seen? Have you seen better pedestrian areas in other places? What's the difference?
Well, there's actually sidewalks in downtown versus the rest of the city, so.
Hey, we got sidewalks. But you get what I'm saying. You know, close the darn road off, make it pedestrian focused, make that intersection pedestrian lead timing, which means that they get the light first, the pedestrian does. Cross all 4 directions at the same time. Make car wait, right? That's prioritization. So we struggle as a city to see that type of vision, to see that reality. Because our team feels like we're doing it. And I'm like, I don't see it anywhere in town. I literally don't see this, not one spot. Sorry, I'm getting riled up. So this is more within the ATMP. And then here we have, yes. So now I'm moving ahead from the ATMP. Who recognizes this? Yeah, what is it? 4th Street. Who has traveled along 4th Street in 66? Do we like that intersection as a pedestrian? Can you be more educated and be safer here? Maybe a little bit, but ultimately, you know, if the cake is made with bad ingredients, right, it's not going to work. So why is this bad? Think about it. What do you see? It's huge.
Lots of turning traffic.
Lots of turning traffic. Right.
Yeah.
You're allowed to turn on red. So 7 lanes, and then what do you have? I'm not too sure. I think that, okay, Walgreens is over here. What do you have back in this region? This is northwest from that intersection. Was it? Sunnyside. And you have other neighborhoods, right? And then what do you have over here on the southeast side? Aquaplex. Who goes to the Aquaplex? Kids. Should kids be able to walk to the Aquaplex? Right? So I heard a rumor, I wasn't there, but within the staff meeting on this project before it was built, someone raised the point. What about kids? Because you can't as a designer think that this is kid friendly. This is not kid friendly. And the staff person at the city, sorry, city staff, but this is the reality. The staff person said they needed to get a ride. They're not meant to walk. And this is in the 2000s. This isn't in the 70s. Yeah.
So we did 4th for Flag, that was LA, 2 allowance.
Yes.
So that was 2000. And then shortly after that was called ELCO, the Anti-Renters Organization, because the YMCA was going to be built on the corner of Turquoise and Forest in that, whatever that quadrant leading up to Buffalo Park. So So the YMCA built down on Turquoise, and then the Aquaplex went in after that. But the YMCA was gonna be huge on that corner and take a bunch of that, well, basically right across from J Lively and stuff, so.
Wow.
But anyway, and the, well, it turned out that the Valley of the Sun YMCA, which is basically the doctor's YMCA, that's why they're located at that hospital.
Oh, wow.
And so, and they said, oh yeah, the kids from Sunnyside will be riding their bikes across Flagstaff, over the hill and stuff.
Really?
To the doctor's YMCA. Anyway, it's history.
Someone else had their hand up? Thank you, Simon. Yeah, Kim.
And Killip School
Yeah.
is a school that has no buses.
Wow.
It's a walking
We're
school.
about to get to Kilo, actually. Or
I
actually
say,
not
I
Kilo,
say this
sorry.
because if you've been there, there's a lot of kids that are driven to
Okay.
Killip.
Is it one that's on 6th?
Yes.
Yeah,
That was
it's
just
the new
redesigned.
one, it's the brand new one.
Yeah.
But there are no buses that
Uh-huh.
transport children to Killip.
So in talking to other cities, peer cities that are way ahead of us, what they have told me is that 5 lanes is the maximum amount of lanes to build at any. So these are called legs of the intersection, each side is a leg. So each leg, 5 lanes max. So that's like 3 going one direction, 2 coming the other direction. 5 lanes max. And then the width of the lane not being 12 feet. So 12, you gotta get it. So as a council member, I had to get in the details. If I wanted to address policing and alternative policing programs, I had to become the police chief, like police chief now. And I say that sometimes sarcastically because I obviously am not qualified to be a police chief. But you have to get in the level of detail to be the engineer, to be able to say, hey, this is specifically what I want. Because if you don't get into that detail, you say, I want you to do this. Are they gonna do it? Probably not, unless they really care to. But to overcome the struggles that you're hearing about over the decades, you have to be the expert in the room. So 12 feet is what the city often designs for, and that's the width of ADOT roads on the S17. Is that the kind of width we want in town? Does that encourage cars to slow down or speed up? Speed up, right? That's a pretty wide lane. Look at that. Next time you're driving or on the road, look at the cars and look how much space they have. So 12 feet is wide. 11 feet, 10 and a half. That's kind of what we want. More 11 is what the city is working towards. And I see staff actually running with that idea and actually implementing it. So that's good. I'm seeing a lot of change, but that's only because I've been a pain in their side for so long and still am. So 7 lanes here on each leg, 8 lanes at a time, I believe. I think counted, I think there's 7 or so on each side. And that's just way too big, right? But this is a teller of what's coming in Flagstaff if we don't do something. Here's another view of that same intersection. And I just wanted to show how car heavy it is, right? As a child or a pedestrian, it's tough. Now, what's this? So this was my first success as a council member, is getting ADOT, because this is an ADOT bridge, getting ADOT to do what? Well, what's different here? Does anyone know? Protected bike lanes on the sides. Look at that. Or just the north side, or whatever side that is. I think that's the west side. But we'll take it, right? And that was like one of the first times ADOT did something like that, I believe. And so that was a big deal. And that was a big win for the community. That was a big win for me. And I felt like we were starting to get on a track that was different than the status quo approach. Building protected versus a standard bike lane on the road in strip lanes with cars going way too fast. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip this slide because there's so much more I want to tell you about. So here we go. Roundabouts. Where is this? This is a big battle. So this is a big challenge that we faced as a community recently, one that I fought to the point that I just went crazy on it. This is Beulah University. This is an intersection yet to be built, but it has the approval to be built. And it's basically, if you take University from Target and you head westbound, it's going to go straight across into the old DMV lot, and it's going to connect with Beulah coming northbound. And you're going to have this massive 2-lane roundabout with all these cars coming in different directions, coming through this intersection roundabout. And then you can see the bike and ped route is along here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah,
So with roundabouts, we do see a reduction in vehicular crashes
correct.
by 35 to 50%. But pedestrian, vehicle on pedestrian crashes increased by about 80% in roundabouts.
Really? Whoa. You need to send me that, because I could not make that argument well enough. But my understanding is that there isn't much data about pedestrian crashes and bike crashes in roundabouts. More car-focused data again. And car collisions are dramatically decreased in roundabouts. Not necessarily 2-lane roundabouts, more so single-lane roundabouts. But there you go. So this is being built in Flagstaff. This has the green light. And remember at the beginning of the meeting how they were talking about $1 million and the project costing $1 million for the longer project, and that the maintenance is going to cost $100,000. Now the million's already been spent. That's the infrastructure. That's been spent. It's about $100,000 a year to maintain it at this point, if it's like last year, and I think about $200,000 to re-up all the curves. So this project originally came to the council as $7.6 million. And I was on board. I thought it was good. Staff was saying that they were going to prioritize bike paths. I thought, great, let's do it. Roundabouts are wonderful. Why not? I didn't realize that these were actually really bad, especially like being larger. Guess how much this project is now? 7.6, I want to say 4 years ago. Wrong number. 15 million. Yeah, I was close. It's 23. $23 million.
I'm watching them build this right outside my window.
Uh-huh.
And it's crazy. I mean, they cut down this great swatch of forest and they're clearing, they're leveling the ground. They brought it down about 10 feet so far. They're still shading it away, to make it all come down. And one thing about this that I think is interesting is it's in 2 phases. This is phase 1. Phase 2, it actually has a pedestrian underpass going to the building. But because it's phase 2, I wonder if they'll actually do it.
Great question.
It's part of the whole Milltown. It has to happen.
It has to
It
happen.
has
The
to
contractor has.
Okay.
Yeah,
There wasn't
it'll be
anything
done.
specific in the document.
It was part of the developer and the contractor. That's part of his responsibility.
Okay.
It should
It'll
be
happen.
done.
I've lived in cities where phase 2s are kind of an idea.
Right.
But this you're saying this one's
No,
actually. in
no,
place.
this one is part of, that's part of their deal on building this whole project.
It wasn't voted on, I don't believe. Was it part of the voted initiative? Not initiative, it was on the ballot?
I don't remember.
I don't think it was.
It's part of Milltown.
Yes,
So,
it's part of Milltown.
yeah, I don't know. It's a part of a 3-way plan.
Right.
The first being Harkins. Like there's a
TND,
whole,
Harkins,
there's a whole like land
moving
swap
pieces.
thingy, but it's all part of that plan.
It's funny, I called up the developer who's in charge of this plan, and I said, hey, this roundabout, problematic, and he goes, I know, it's horrible, it's way too big, it doesn't support bike ped, and I'm like, let's have a meeting with staff. He said, yes, let's do it. And I contacted staff and said, whoa, let's get council majority, and then it got kicked down the line for 6 months, and somehow staff found $9 million to do it, and they didn't even bring it to, anyways. We found a way to fund it with additional funding. Okay, thank you. So yet, that was never an issue. The 23 overage, in total, 23 million. They found the money there, no problem, right? Never even brought up to council, hey, have a concern here. But for this bike pilot, right? So that's coming in, and I can't wait to see it because I think it's gonna be a big mess. Because cars in a 2-lane roundabout are confused, they're concerned, they're looking around, but are they looking for bikes and pedestrians? Probably not. They're looking for other cars, right?
So how does the bike get across those?
So they have to ride up here and then go like this and then come like this. And then each time you cross, you have cars coming at you on both sides, right?
It's safer to take the lane.
If you feel comfortable taking the lane, that is the safest approach. But if you're 8 years old or 80 years old or slower or uncomfortable taking the lane, you have to go around and navigate each lane, each crossing, making sure these trucks and these vehicles are stopped as you're crossing 2 lanes. And then you got 2 more lanes coming from your right?
And since we're in this group, so seeing that, I'm just really asked about this one. This is so interesting, why they do this. But in the bottom right, so perfect. So see how that is a bike way? It
Okay.
ends, not going towards you, so there you go, it ends, and that turns back into a sidewalk. So it just takes you straight back into the signalized intersection. And if you took that out to get back into the bike lane, that is exactly where the right-hand turn lane also begins for the cars. And so you're re-entering the road right when cars are coming into the right-hand turn lane. Like the conflict is so, it's so insane.
It's all about trade-offs, is what you'll learn if you dive into this further, engineering designs. And it's just a matter of who's getting the priority.
That's gonna become a major passage for students
Oh,
on the west side. too. It's gonna be a real mess. The university should be involved in this.
Right here, I believe it is, that's where this huge project Milltown is coming in. I might have the corner wrong, but there's this huge project with like 800 students who be living there. And you have like Fremont down the street, and other student projects, and you have NAU. This is gonna be a mess. And then the crossing over the street to Target, or under the street, the underpass, I'm not worried about that being built, but that's on the north side of the street, and it's an underpass. There's no at-grade crossing, meaning you can't cross Milton at the street level, you have to go under. Any concerns with that?
And at Target, if you're going east-west past Target, past Target towards this roundabout, they don't have a marking. So you have to go in the Target driveway to get onto the path to go in the underpass.
So 120 feet wide, I think 20 feet wide, and just imagine trying to walk under there at 9, 10 p.m. after you've done your research or your homework on campus. Maybe you're female perhaps, and you're a little bit more concerned about your safety. Going through this huge tunnel, I was one of the only people being like, hello, we need an at-grade crossing here, and ADOT said no. We will not stop cars to allow pedestrians to cross. So just another example. Okay, I only have a few more minutes, right?
Yeah.
So I want to run through a couple things really quick, but here's another roundabout that got approved at the corner of Lockett and 4th Street. So as you can see, there's a theme for roundabouts at the city, and it's because it moves cars more efficiently. Yes,
Are you sure that was the approval and not the double?
this is it. I think it's called a
Are you
turbo.
Are you
Yes.
sure there's not one below it?
Oh, there actually is
There's
an
a-
ultra design.
I thought there was a double roundabout.
Well, it has 2 lanes.
No. Two
Oh,
roundabouts.
that didn't get approved. That was
Okay.
really expensive.
So I was on this one, and I was asking about kids.
Yeah.
Because there's no actual crosswalk.
So
Or
they're
like,
actually,
and not crosswalk, there's no crossing guard.
right.
And so they're like, oh, so I'm like, you're asking them to dart and dash.
Yep.
I was very upset.
Now, this is an outdated design, just slightly. The crossings are Z crossings, so you can't just go straight across. You have to go halfway and then do a little Z movement, then do the other part. And it's because of the kids, and there's also going to be beacons at each of those. Do you think staff wanted to do that? No. Do you think that they had the funding available or desire for it? No. But council had my back and the community's back and said, okay, let's at least do that. Because what I was saying is, remove this darn right turn lane, make this a 1-lane roundabout. This is way too straight. This is going to be a speeding effort right here. This is an on-ramp right here into Lockett. And cars are going to be going way too fast in an area with 3 schools and 2 neighborhoods and a public library. Are you kidding? In the name of safety that we're doing this. And it went up from, I think, $1 million project to like a $4.1 million project. But yet, no issue with funding there.
Different company.
Oh,
Yeah.
different company. I was curious if they're the same people.
Different design.
Okay, I think this is the last one. This is Lone Tree, and Lone Tree was a huge, big battle. It wasn't pretty, it was ugly. It was not something I think many people were proud of, but yet the end result is something we all are happy about. But they were going to build this huge project over Lone Tree, about $120 million, and with this huge intersection just like 4th Street. Oh, and that's not coming up, darn it. I had an image here of a protected intersection because that's the last thing I wanted to leave you with. And a protected intersection is what's coming. And basically, unfortunately, the graphic's not showing, but let me see if I can go back up to a different graphic.
Refresh.
Okay. We'll wrap it up, but hopefully this is like eye-opening for you.
You got it.
Okay, so keep going down. This is the whole project for Lone Tree. Okay, this is a protected intersection, and this is something that they decided to do at Lone Tree, and it's the first time the city agreed to do a protected intersection. So protected intersection, this is obviously a very simplified version, but as you can see, what's different here is that, okay, so if a cyclist is going northbound here, they go all the way to this point. And then let's say they have the red lights. The car is stacked behind this white line. No right turn on red. Pedestrian and the cyclist get the green light first, 5 seconds. They can start going. Often they can cross the intersection before the car even gets the green light to turn right. Do you think that would address some of those crashes? Some of them. Yes, at least those at the intersection, yeah.
Those white, shapes, those are all like very.
Yes, those are curves, bumped out curves to make the car make a sharper right-hand turn. Not like an on-ramp, but a 90-degree right turn, right? Because you can't do that going 20 miles an hour, right? And so slowing cars down, going back to the way of living in the 70s, and also prioritizing the safety needs of bikes and pedestrians. I think those are the key design elements of a protected intersection, and I'm so proud that the city team is really embracing this and running with it. And we have numerous protected intersections in the pipeline today. Along Lone Tree, there's 3 of them, including Lone Tree and Butler, and then San Fran and Butler and Beaver and Butler are also being built or planned for with protected intersections. And then once we as a city start getting on it, I'm hoping we as a community can put pressure on ADOT to do that at 66 and Beaver, 66 and San Fran, where the highest crashes occur between pedestrians and cyclists. I think that's about, do we have like another minute or two, or are we done?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. As you can tell, we're up against a lot. You know, I'm hoping that what you got is a good taste of all the efforts prior over the decades and all the shoulda, woulda, couldas as to like, oh, we're doing something, oh, wait, nothing happened. Oh, we're doing something and we kind of got something done. But we have a lot of work to do. But I can tell you that when you speak up at a council meeting, when you email the city council, and when you engage in the public process, your voice is heard, and it's actually impacting the future path that we're on 100%. And so there are ample opportunities at the city council meetings and at the VAC meetings, transportation commission meetings, a whole bunch of opportunities for you to get involved and speak up and help make sure that we stay on the right path. Because we have all the weights pushing against us. You know, we have a lot pushing against us. Any last comments or questions? I know we covered a lot, but yeah.
I have one random question, honestly. For early 1900s, a lot of cities had streetcars that were never taken out.
Yeah.
Did that happen in Flagstaff too? Or
I'm not aware that Flagstaff had streetcars. I don't think we were a big enough city for that.
Yeah, pretty much.
San Francisco, California too, but I'm not aware that we did. I can look it up for you.
I was just curious because I couldn't find anything for people, but
I don't think so. I think we were too
every
small.
city had one.
Right.
Cars.
Well, even in the Midwest during that time, we had small towns connected by this.
Yeah, I saw.
So it's quite a bit different than just the city.
I saw at one point you could actually get from Augusta, Maine to Chicago just by streetcar.
Wow. Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, it's in the Midwest and Central.
If you dig into the history and the politics behind the scenes, what the automotive industry did, some of the bigger automotive companies, and their response, their role in all this, they didn't want to see people take the streetcar. They wanted everyone to have to rely on the car, right?
And it was the bus lines that really started in the big cities to try to push the streetcars out.
What other comments or questions do you have? Yes?
If Flagstaff had nothing, none of this, no bike lanes, no shared use paths, foot system, what would you advocate for first? Where would you start?
If we had nothing.
We had nothing.
I would say a plan, for sure. But I hate to say that.
But like, what kind of like infrastructure element, I guess? Would it be paths? Would it be this type of intersection? Like what would
this intersection for sure. This
Really?
is key.
Okay.
This intersection is key to our success, especially given the battles between these and roundabouts. Like 4th Street in Butler is a intersection that the city is designing today. And they're planning to build a 2-lane roundabout. That's what they want to build. And that, again, is not good for us, right? So I am really pushing hard with a bunch of other people to say, no, build a protected intersection there, even though it slows cars down. It doesn't allow as many people to move as fast. This is what we need, right? But that for intersections, and then for like networks, bikeways is what they call it. East to west, north to south. And then the sad thing is, this is what we still need today. Patchy systems like what we have doesn't work. We need a north to south brown line trail, and we need an east to west red line, whatever, you know, like, and the city knows it, they just haven't prioritized it.
I said something
Yeah.
to that, real fast, and then there was some hands over there. Basically, if you look at every single plan, people identify the same major roads over and over and over again because they're the main traffic throughputs for the city. It's super consistent across multiple decades, how people try to get around and where they try to travel. I think one of the difficulties, if you wanted to build a fully separated system, is with land ownership and actually having the right as a city to take that land instead of doing something that's adjacent to the roads.
Or have we condemned in the past? We have. Will we do it in the future? We will. So there's a will, there's a way, yeah.
I think with the separated systems, I think we have like a clean slate that seems to be like the places that are most bicycle friendly. You don't take Milton because you don't need to take Milton to
Right.
get to Target. You have your own bike route, which is faster and more comfortable and safer, and the cars are over there. So I don't know. I would it would be like the ideal state, right? To just totally separate. Like I have my biking route, which is totally different than the driving route, which is kind of what I do right now in my community. Like when I grad plan, it is not the same route that I take when I drive.
Yeah.
It's right. We all know
Yeah.
cruise and horse countries and stuff. It's super fun. So it's really interesting to talk about like Milton, where there's driveways every 200 feet. It's not a route, but it would be interesting. I really want to take you over the history of the conversations that go on within the council, because if you're a bicyclist, and I didn't even learn that until like 10 years into community, like nobody teaches us how to bike. Like we started as 5-year-olds on the sidewalk.
I tried.
Someone
Yes. I didn't have a kid when I was growing up. And like as adults, we got like we came and learned to do a cycling class, and I think that it was so but anyways, like I think we can grow from our shared experiences and maybe influence council on like thinking outside of the box, because I think 90% of our experiences as a car driver, when we're growing up in a car and we're watching people drive, and then we kind of need to get that more experience as bicyclists to go, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. I don't know, sorry. So I kind of just sort of.
So we're gonna wrap up there, Kenny.
Hey, somebody online just asked if we can share the slides, if I email them out after this, is that okay? Or if they're not.
Let me take a look at them.
Maybe tell them to share their email with you.
Yeah, that would be better.
Yeah. I'd like to wrap up because I want to let you all go. It's been almost 2 hours, and I so appreciate you taking the day. This is a huge course on the history. There is a test. You can't leave until you pass it. But in closing, I just want to say on a real positive note, the city is taking a lot of these things seriously, as you can tell. We're kind of at times not fully getting it. You know, we tried to do a protected intersection with 8 lanes at Lone Tree and Butler, and had a fight to get down to 5 lanes. But like they tried, bless their hearts, right? But you can't have it both ways. You can't accommodate cars and prioritize cars while also prioritizing pedestrians. There's trade-offs. This is how it is. And so, just so you know, it's not safety that we're talking about when you talk to engineers, it's comfort. So when you speak up to council and you speak to, design and whatnot, bring up comfort levels. Vulnerable pedestrians and cyclists need to be comfortable through the design. The city's doing a lot of great things with bike ped. They need to do a lot more. But one thing, Mark, as part of his name keeps being brought up, he's our multimodal planner, party of 1 for the last 18 years at the city. And next year, he's, I think, going to have 2 or 3 additional staff members. So that's huge for amplifying the education, the outreach, the effort, et cetera, et cetera. But very proud of where the city's heading, but also recognize there's a ton of work still to do every week at that city. So please engage in the process and stay involved. Kim, any closing words from you? And then Sam?
I don't know. No, I don't know. I blanked, I have no idea.
Okay, we'll start with Sam.
Go.
Okay, I mean, I think it's a thing to consider is that the infrastructure we have, the infrastructure we have isn't perfect, but we didn't have any infrastructure before, right? All of this is the result of advocacy and efforts over multiple decades by many people, many different rounds to get literally anything. So, you know, I'm not saying that I'm cool with what's here, but I am saying that advocacy is, like you were saying, really critical to this, and sustained advocacy in planning, right? And an understanding of planning so that you can, for instance, if you want to, email city council and be like, did you know that in 1979 you identified this as a priority and you still haven't done it? Just so you know.
And on that note, you know, I would always advocate cyclists and walkers to take photos of sketchy areas where there's tons of cinders and lack of maintenance and email it to the city council once a week. Be on it, you know, and create that culture of engagement with your council members and come and give comments and speak up, but at least send us an email. Or send them an email. And it goes a real long way. But Kim, did you have any words of wisdom or inspiration to share?
I know I'm on the spot. I would say make sure you know, if you don't know where to ride, or you have friends that don't know where to ride, let's get education so that we're all good ambassadors, right, for riding, and you know, you can, I don't know. I always yell at the one like, no, what are you doing?
Yeah.
No, not do that. Anyway, so say education, because that's what I do.
And I fully agree. We gotta control what we can control, and we do need to educate our peers and our other peer cyclists and walkers. Best practices, visibility, et cetera, et cetera. You know I put a lot of blame on other people, but we also need to be responsible. So I fully agree and appreciate that message.
And I do teach a yearly class, I swear. Every year.
Where can we find that information?
We just had it. It
We live
was during
streamed it.
Bike Month.
It's live. It's archived.
We did. It's
It's
okay.
archived.
It's on FBO's website.
And
No,
Facebook page.
And Facebook, there.
I'll add
All sorts of info.
Anything else? I'm gonna stick around if anyone has anything else they'd like to chat about, but again, thank you so much for coming and have a great night. And again, thank you to Kenny and my library for having us. It's a wrap.
I was curious about one thing,
Yeah.
and that's snow removal.